BC, where it is 9 a.m. Pacific here, and I am really, really grateful to be here on this peaceful country, on this land where I am a guest of the Coast Salish people of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh Nations, and welcome to episode 112 of the Psychedelic Revelations podcast. Today, we are really excited to have Lauren Alderfer with us. She is the author of Mindful Microdosing, and she has a beautiful, colorful background that we're going to get into a bit today. One of my colleagues in this field that I just truly admire, respect, and honor. So happy to have this conversation today. For those of you who have never joined us before, welcome. For those of you who are familiar with the Psychedelic Revelations podcast, welcome to our new format, which is on Zoom, where we can actually see each other rather than what we've done for the last 4.5, almost 5 years being an audio only podcast. So my heart is beating a little bit more strongly than usual as we test out new technology and new systems, and super grateful to have a guest who I know can just go with the flow with us. As you know, if you've joined us before, we like to start before we really get into anything, into the meat of the matter. We really like to take a couple of minutes to just become present, to just ground into this moment. We usually call it our moment of grounding and gratitude. And it's something that I generally lead us through, just doing that for a couple of minutes before we kick off. But today, because this is Lauren's wheelhouse, mindfulness, it's where everything stems from. I really wanted to turn it over to you, Lauren, to lead us through just a couple of minutes of becoming present and helping me slow down my heartbeat.
Well,
Thanks for
thank you,
joining us.
Dana, and also Wendy. Thank you so much for having me today, and welcome to everyone. I do always enjoy what I call mindful moment as we transition. So I'll ask all of us to just take in a nice deep breath, and if you feel like you're in a safe space where you can close your eyes and that feels inviting, please do. And then with that breath, knowing that the breath helps to ground us and keep us anchored. But as you breathe in, I'd like us to all imagine that we are not just in a way to imagine, but we are connected. So let us visualize a silver thread that as we breathe in into that heart space, visualize, imagine a silver thread growing with your breath. So with the incoming breath, inviting in this ball or thread, whatever you might see. And if you don't see it, just imagine it, because the brain will react the same way. And let it be in your heart space. So breathing in, and as you breathe in, make that silver a little more activated. And as you breathe out, feel the thread extending out and even reaching others here in this Zoom room that we're sharing together. And as you breathe in again, that silver shining brighter with all the goodness you're taking in with that in breath. And as you breathe out, feeling that your thread is connecting to others. And as you breathe in again, feel that the thread of others and their goodwill and their more gentle space of peace and kindness is reaching you. And again, as you breathe out, you are also connecting in a greater, firmer way with all of us together in this room, virtually, energetically, through this silver thread activated by our breath as we continue to breathe in and breathe out. Breathing in goodness, breathing in peace, breathing in a greater sense of well-being, kindness, groundedness, and breathing those things out as well, connecting to each other, and receiving it all with a heart of gratitude. And just a few more gentle breaths. And as we activate our breath and our awareness just a little bit more with one last nice big breath, taking it in and breathing it out, sharing it with others, and coming back to the room and the discussion ahead.
Ooh, Lauren, thank you so much for leading us through that. I definitely feel more present and more calm, and yeah, really appreciated that. Thank you. One of the other things we generally do just to start things off is to just fill our hearts with gratitude for, the fact that we get to be here, the fact that we get to gather like this, and for all the things that we can be grateful for in our lives. And again, just to pass it over to our guest, Lauren, to just give you the opportunity to acknowledge where you might like to place any gratitude, anyone you might like to acknowledge who has supported you, helped you, and kind of got you to where you are doing what you're doing today.
Oh, wow. Well, we're going to be diving into the area of Alzheimer's. And I would actually like to give gratitude to my husband of over 44 years. We met in Ecuador, where we both happened to be working so many years ago. And, uh, every step of the way, even during the hard times, which are now, also bring out so much um, opening. I think everything is just opening us up, peeling the layers of the onion, and there's always hope and more goodwill and always a deeper opportunity of coming into a greater sense of wellness and whole being. So today, I would really like to send out the gratitude to my husband, who will be talking about a bit in the hour or so ahead.
Beautiful. Thank you, Lauren. And I'm just going to step back and introduce you to those of you who don't know you. Um, This is Lauren's bio, like short bio, that says Lauren Alderfer is an award-winning mindfulness author, microdosing coach, and author of Mindful Microdosing, a guidebook and journal. Host of the Microdosing and More podcast, end of life doula, mother, wife, and caregiver to her husband Henry, who lives with Alzheimer's. But I happen to know there's a few more juicy tidbits than just that bio. And just a few of them that I pulled out was that some things I know about Lauren is that she had an initiation into meditation before she was even 13 years old. She spent her formative years training with world learning and experiential based education steeped in self reflection and dedicated to creating a more sustainable, peaceful, and just world. She continued on to become an adjunct faculty member at SIT Graduate Institute World Learning for over 25 years. She started her career in the Andean region and lived there for more than 20 years, publishing her first book, Teaching from the Heart of Mindfulness, in 2015. And that book went on to win the first place in the Indie Awards for Best Book in Education. And of course, publishing her mindful microdosing book and journal, and recognized for her many contributions, having the foreword of two of her books written by His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. So that is just like, and that's just the tip of the iceberg because we've had a few conversations, and I know like you've got such a rich background that really draws in your experiences and your influences from the East and from the West and packages them all together in this person and this being that you are today that brings so much mindfulness and education and goodness into the world, Lauren. I'd love to just pass it over to you to see if there's any little gaps in there that you might want to fill us in on.
Well, I really want to thank you for that. It's always funny to hear back, what is part of my life, right? And it is, and as I heard you talking, I was thinking that when you're an expat, I mean, I was an expat before digital nomads, and the digital nomads definitely go in and out of other cultures. But when you live in a culture for years and years and years, you're always in it and out of it. And even when I come back to North America, I'm in it and out of it. So I have the Andean region in me. I lived on the Indian subcontinent for 20 years and I grew up until I was 16 in the US. So it's like I have these ways of seeing cultures and how people operate. And my life sounds very adventurous, and it certainly has been and will continue to be. But at the end of the day, we're all the same. We're all having similar challenges. We all have similar hurts, similar trauma. You know, we all are so much the same. And I think that no matter where I've lived, I've always tried and thrive on connecting from the heart. With all of our differences, we are fundamentally the same.
Oh,
That's what kind of comes
thank
up right now.
you. Yeah, thank you for just kind of reminding us of that. And for myself as well, I share that background of being an expat before there were digital nomads and living for a long time, living more than half my life overseas, and just that one foot in this world and one in the other, but that just interconnectedness of the human experience, basically, that we
Yeah,
all share. So
yeah,
today we're talking with Lauren about dementia and Alzheimer's and microdosing. So really, Lauren, came into this area of microdosing through her mindfulness practice and married together mindfulness with microdosing. But your life has changed a lot in the last few years and really kind of pivoted and changed your focus and how and where you spend your energy, what you're researching, all sorts of things, what you're offering into the world. And so I thought we might start out, Lauren, with almost just a little bit of storytelling by you of what's been happening in your life the past few years, and your life and Henry's life, and what's led you into like really focusing on this area where dementia can support microdosing, could be supportive not only in the realm of dementia and Alzheimer's, but in the realm of caregiving.
exactly. Well, before we dive into that, can I just ask if people could raise their hands if they had a loved one or a close friend or a family member that they know who has had or has dementia right now? And that's what usually happens. It's like this is what some of the human experience that we all share, and at some time or another. And so for me, my path has always been mindfulness from a very early age of contemplative practices. And as I was trained in becoming a microdosing coach through the Microdosing Institute, which was a fantastic program, I, in my own life, started microdosing. And because of my background in mindfulness, I didn't feel that there was a real explicit understanding of mindfulness within the microdosing and psychedelic community in general. So that was where I started. And I knew that my husband, he took a very bad fall in 2017. So I knew since then that he had never come back to be the same. And I knew he had dementia. But as many people know, it takes a while before it gets diagnosed. And I was actually not really that interested in having a diagnosis. I just felt it didn't make that much of a difference. But the diagnosis did finally come a few years ago with Alzheimer's. And I think that was more instrumental for him. And since I was microdosing and know a lot about microdosing, he started microdosing, and we did see a lot of improvement in some ways, although the decline keeps happening. And that's hard to explain, but I will as we dive into the conversation. But I think what really was the impulse was my husband wanting me to have his life count with someone with Alzheimer's for the betterment of others. And he wanted to go public, if you will, with his story and how microdosing has really helped him. And because of the background that Dana was sharing, which is also my husband's background to very similar, we have not the most typical Western perspective on aging, and just to share our story as it unfolds. And that's what we've been doing. I've been doing it through a blog, and also as Dana mentioned, the podcast Microdosing and More, where I'm also delving into like really trying to find things that are helpful for people with dementia. But also, as you mentioned, as I moved through this journey, what I realized was that it's not, when you talk about dementia, you have to talk about the caregivers. You can't do one without the other. And I think that was a big wake up call for me. And then I have free things on my website for caregivers, because as one myself, I kept meeting and I keep meeting caregivers who are just completely overwhelmed or get put on SSRIs. It's a very, it's a very challenging, difficult time. So we can get more into that. But that's really the story. And it's an unfolding story in real time with, not trying to hide when I get overwhelmed. I've written about my overwhelm as well. At times, this is not an easy thing. And even if you've been practicing mindfulness for decades and decades, um, part of mindfulness is being aware of what you're feeling, not trying to brush it aside, but also knowing that I can name it, and I know that I can try to meet it with greater equanimity, and that it won't, everything is impermanent, like even feelings and situations and high emotions or feeling overwhelmed. So that's just a snippet of really where I'm at right now and what we're sharing. And I don't really know how it will all unfold. But caregiving is certainly a part of it, and microdosing certainly can be a big support for caregivers.
Yeah, I mean this story, Lauren, it hits so close to my heart. I feel actually tears bubbling up. Wasn't expecting just that I was the primary caregiver for my dad as he declined over the years with dementia and eventually um, took his, that took him out of this world into the next. But the beauty of it, the special moments, the stress, the time, the heartbreak, like there's just so many emotions there and overarchingly the love, And so um, the fact that microdosing can support not only those with dementia, with Alzheimer's, but with caregivers is just, it's so yeah, so dear to me. I was fortunate that as my dad was going through this, I was already a microdosing facilitator. And I definitely worked with sacred, beautiful mushrooms to support me through the times with my dad. For my dad, it was very interesting though. He kind of got a little bit of what I do and what bring to the world, but I wasn't expecting him to really understand any of it, but I would just talk to him. And at one point, when he was in one of his more lucid moments, he just kind of paused and he looked at me with tears in his eyes. And he said, "You know that thing that you do for other people?"
Hmm.
And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Like with that medicine you work with?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Do you think you could do that with me?"
Oh,
So he got enough of it. But at that point, he was in a care home. And he really couldn't make an informed choice. And how was I going to explain to his doctors that maybe every second day he was having some LSD or some mushrooms or something? So, the ethical considerations around this are going to be a big part of what we talk about today. I didn't know that this was so close to the surface, but I guess it always is. But yeah, so with Henry, you've been able to really have him through all the years of you learning about microdosing and embracing microdosing and bring it into your lives. And from what I understand, you could start working with him with microdosing while he still could provide informed consent. And so, yeah, just tell us a little bit more about, how microdosing is going for him and how you introduced it. And yeah.
all right, but I want to get back to that ethical question because I think it's really key, and I've thought a lot about it, and I've spoken to several people it's interesting getting so many opinions. But yes, Henry started microdosing when he was still considered mild cognitive impairment. He still thinks he has mild cognitive impairment. It's more moderate at this point. So he does know that he's microdosing. However, with even other medications, like I have to be sure that I give it to him, that he takes it, all that. But so we do see improvement, and it's hard to understand. But if you've been with people with dementia, you understand that it's not a line, a linear chronological thing that makes sense. But for instance, he had stopped reading completely, and when he started microdosing, he started reading again. His writing was declining. He's writing better. He started writing better again. However, and this is the weird part, the Alzheimer's was still continuing. like comes up in different ways, but I can say that one of the biggest benefits is that he sleeps so soundly through the night, and I know that's from microdosing, and he does too, because every once in a while he won't microdose for a week or so due to travel or some situation, and he'll microdose again, and the difference is so significant that he sleeps so soundly. And this is usually as gentlemen get older, they might have to go to the bathroom to urinate during the night, several times, and there are medications for that. But when he microdoses, he will go straight from, say, 8 or 9 in the morning till 4:30 or 5, 8 or 9 in the evening till 4 or 5 in the morning. And so what we know about sleep and how important it is for the brain to rest um, is significant. So if it were only for that one and only benefit of microdosing, I don't know why more people wouldn't want to do it just for that, even with or without dementia. But we also see his endurance is better, his physical endurance, especially if he wants to go out in the garden and do things. Um, but now I see decline again in his writing isn't so good. So maybe we up the dose a little. Um, so that idea of how microdosing is helping, but he knows that he is microdosing is still very much a part of his journey right now. But from the very beginning, I also asked those questions, Dana. And at that point, I think it was one of there was an article about how they had LSD given to someone with the consent of the family of someone who is in later stage Alzheimer's. And when she took the LSD, she opened her eyes and knew everybody who was in the room, her closest relatives, and she was present with that. And I remember my reaction was really interesting to me, because my reaction was not even about informed consent, but like, if someone's in those later stages of Alzheimer's, is that something we should be doing? Like, who is that serving? Is it serving the people that are around because we want to say goodbye or have contact with that person? Or, but at the same time, it's really interesting to note that LSD did have that effect, and that there is a possibility that the brain can change in a way where people can be more present. So, you know, but that was my first reaction. But the idea of the ethics of someone who doesn't give informed consent, what I've come around to really understand is, if we look at how many medications people in advanced states of Alzheimer's or dementia are taking without their informed consent, that is how they're treated. So then that flips that whole question up in the air as well. Um, and of course, we have if we do think about informed consent, like with Henry, I could ask for an advance directive, so I know, would he like me to keep doing that even when he knows he may not be taking it? So I think these are all really good questions, and these ethical questions are really important. And part of that is just, let's have an open conversation and start talking, because people with dementia, most of the time, I feel it, don't want to talk about it. They don't want to share. They don't want their friends and family to know. It takes many years to feel comfortable to talk about it, if they do. That's part of what my public advocacy with Henry Support is all about, is like, we have these tools. And as you and I are in this area of education with plant medicine, particularly mushrooms, but other plant medicines, even some psychedelics, are showing great promise for brain health.
Yeah, there's just so much in that, what you just shared there, that I want to get into. But I think I have a question, first of all. With Henry's microdosing, are you microdosing with mushrooms or with LSD? Is Henry?
So when I'm in Canada, I feel very comfortable. We have a daughter in Canada and her family. So one daughter in Canada, one daughter in the US. When we're in Canada, I feel very comfortable accessing some of the things you're saying. In the US, I don't. Um, so I think sourcing is a really important thing for people to feel comfortable about how they're sourcing. So you're in BC, you're very lucky to be in a place where things are decriminalized. There's so much information, there's good quality, the sourcing. I think many people who I meet are in areas where the politics don't support it, or they have to be quiet, or they don't know people. I'm in Vermont right now. I just got back from Toronto yesterday, actually. And again, we have a very, more farm to table more like BC probably. So I think it's really dependent on where people live. So for us, it's mushrooms. But what I want to say is I'm learning more and more about some of the other psychedelics that are showing really great promise. In the New York Times just a few weeks ago, one of our most conservative politicians talked about ibogaine, and he went down to Mexico, and another senator, and in the article it talked about her taking it because her grandmother had Alzheimer's. So, you know, this is this is happening. So in a few more years, we're going to know so much more. But right now, for Henry, we're looking at different varieties of mushrooms, but mostly mushrooms. Yes.
Thank you. And then the other thing we were talking about is that informed consent. And when you think about the medications, you're right, that kind of flips that all on the head. At the same time, like, do you disclose to Henry's medical doctors that you're microdosing? Because there is something different. And even when you say you could get an advance directive to keep microdosing afterwards, but can you get
Well,
this for activity that in many places is still illegal?
correct. And I actually have a blog on that because when I was with my primary care physician, which we call in the US, I've just been in the US for a few years. I'm learning the whole system. So I decided to tell my doctor, and he didn't, he's a naturopath. So, I thought, okay, he'd be open-minded. And he started grilling me if I was depressed. And I saw him, and he wanted to note it down as a mental condition that I was taking a substance that's illegal. And I saw him put it into his file there, writing something, and it really upset me. And I didn't learn until later that what you can say to a doctor is, this is off record. I want to share something off record. Now, whether they put it in the record or not, I don't know. In Canada, it's very different because you have a nationalized system, but in the US, you can have insurers that won't insure you because of certain things. So again, we go back to geography and policies, right? And laws. Henry's primary, who now is mine as well, when we mentioned microdosing, the first thing she said to us was, I have a lot of patients that find that very helpful. When it becomes legal, I will definitely want to think about that for my patients. So she's very supportive. She didn't write anything in the files. So there you go, right? So you're right. I hadn't even thought of an advance. You can't do an official advance directive, but you could, so how do you do that? Let's hope policies and laws change as we see the benefits of some of these psychoactive ingredients.
Yeah, a really good reason to get behind some of the advocacy work that's being done in Canada, in the US, wherever you might be. I found it very interesting that reporting back on how microdosing is going for Henry, that you can definitely notice the benefits. And I had seen your post on LinkedIn about that, just being able to get a good night's sleep. And like that's a foundation for everything, particularly cognitively. So that is so important, but so interesting how the two roads can parallel beside each other, the decline and the benefits.
Yeah. I mean, that goes back to, is it right to bring someone back? And for what reason? So he knows he wants to do it. He knows he's declining. Alzheimer's, dementia, we don't know enough. But part of that is anchored in Henry and I having a very, very strong, um, I want to say, spiritual, faithful understanding of our lives and karma. And as you know, in one of the four Buddhist principles, we're going to get old and, get sick and suffer. So we, he just turned 79. He's a bit older than me, but it's like, this is our lives, and no one has ever escaped it. Death is always imminent. It's the one thing we know will happen to us. And so I've done a lot of practices, Buddhist practices around death and impermanence, and the Bardo practices in Nepal. So when you have, and Henry as well, and I've done a lot of training, as you mentioned, the doula training. But even before I did that, I did a lot of training as a caregiver for my own mother and mother-in-law, and through with Joan Halifax and others, so that it really helps you face what is there and not to run away from it. And so even with dementia, it's not to run away, and there are lessons in it all. When I was in Toronto, my daughter's and my daughter's saying, "Mom, you've gotten so sweet and gentle with Dad." And believe me, I wasn't like that a few years ago when I was so confused and why didn't he do that? And the expectations were there, and then the frustration. So we go through this arc of emotions and relationships. And so everything I do have that odd attitude that there is always something in it. And to have, so for me, you know, I'm coming back to, um, I don't want to use the word karma, but that in every moment there is an opportunity of greater learning, greater connectiveness to yourself, to the other person, to the world. And I don't want to sound so like cliche about it, because this is a really, really difficult part of the journey. Um, but I don't want to say, oh, it shouldn't be there. Because so many people, and even my husband is like, oh, I can do this, I can do that. And it's like, no, we're here. This is it. Let's face it.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, thank you so much for bringing yours and Henry's story to the world because we we need to learn these different ways of approaching our aging and our cognitive decline and everything that comes along with it. And I thought I had written down some statistics, but I just don't know where I put them. So, but anyways, just that the rates of dementia and Alzheimer's are increasing like so much in the world that if this has not touched your life yet, you can pretty much be assured that at some point it will with someone that you love. And so really appreciate you taking the lead in this, Lauren. I'm curious, I'd love to talk about microdosing for caregivers, but before we move on from Henry's story, really, and thank you, Henry, I hope you get to listen to this afterwards. Um, I'm wondering about any specific doses or protocols that you have found, particularly beneficial.
That's a really good question because I also do, private mentoring one-on-one with people who are microdosing. And a lot of my clients, most of my clients are over 60, and quite a few are in their 80s. And what we did with Henry in the beginning, and I find it was very helpful, was very low dose every day. I know that, Jim Fadiman in particular, but others talk about taking a break. And that part of that, well, when we were doing our microdosing institute training, when Jim Fadiman spoke to our group, he said there's no scientific evidence that there's any buildup, that there's any reason to take a break. But I've, in his book and recently when he speaks, he does, as do most people, they recommend taking a break. So say 8 weeks on, a week or two off. And why? My understanding with what Jim says is it's kind of a reset because basically what we're doing is we're building up the immune system. And at a certain point, like you're good. Like maybe you don't need to microdose anymore. However, I find if people are in their 80s and it's helping them, I don't necessarily recommend a break. However, a break naturally occurs. They're going to travel and fly somewhere, or they're visiting their grandkids, or they forgot to take it for a week, or they ran out. So there's usually a natural break, but otherwise, my protocol is every other day, and I'm talking about 50 milligrams of mushrooms. It's like very small, but they can tell the difference, but it's not enough to like, oh, something's happening. Um, and then, but more recently, we decided to try the Fadiman protocol. Like, what would, because Henry was feeling like he's like maybe he needs a little bit more of a boost and he's feeling whatever it might be. So we started to do that. And so the idea, but why am I doing that? And this is part of what I do in the book, and especially of like, why are you choosing a certain substance? Why are you choosing to take it a certain way? Like, what's the rhythm that works for you? And again, in this question is, why would I choose to do it differently? So I was explaining why that small dose, but always, also as you're older, you're going to forget things. So it's just better to have it the same. Um, but what I wanted to do is, what would it be like if he had a much higher dose, say 50 to 100? So we're doubling the dose, even though 100 milligrams is considered very low for most people. 100 milligrams when you're in your 80s is a nice little microdose. You can still, you feel the difference. You might not feel like a moment of like, oh, it's kind of like I feel a little bit of a buzz or something, but it was enough. So anyhow, we started doing that and we got up to about 150 at one point, 120, I think we settled on. And it was a really interesting thing to observe because it was a different experience than every day. But I felt so the Fadiman protocol, just to be clear, is one day you ingest one day, the second day is the afterglow, and the third day is kind of your baseline. So it's one day on, 2 days off. What we found is that that third day was not the best day for Henry. So it didn't make sense. But that first day was better for him and was the second day. So then what we just, so again, it's like, I think for microdosing, is that there isn't a specific way to do it or a specific dose. It's really asking the questions. And this is my take on like being more mindful about everything we do. So when it comes to microdosing, what are we trying to get at? Is he sleeping well? Is he more focused? Um, is it a dose that he can be still stay really calm that doesn't make him too dizzy or too, whatever it might be, or too agitated? And actually, I do want to, now that I brought up agitation, um, that's one of the things his siblings have seen, that there's less anxiety. And so we'll get in, if we could take that thread up after. But so if we're looking at the dose, it's really what are we trying to get after, and how much and how often would be something that's so individualized. However, I would say that that everyday low dose seems to be really nice for so many of my clients.
Nice. Okay, thank you, Lauren. And I think it really dovetails into microdosing for everybody. It's such a personal experience, and it's very hard to kind of give a prescription for microdosing. There's so many lifestyle factors and history and stage of life and physiological aspects and stuff. So a really good reason to work with someone who can provide some guidance and insight for you. But I find that very interesting, the really low dose on the everyday, particularly for older people, as something to try. So,
And then the other thing we haven't mentioned is the variety. And
mm,
I will say that I am very fond of a particular variety called B positive for people who are over 60. I love that variety because it's just a little bit of a pep in your step, a little bit of like, and for caregivers also, it's very, very gentle, but I love the names of the mushrooms because I really do think there's a reason for that name because it does give their signature, it gives a hint at their signature personality. So B positive can be B with a plus sign or B positive. And I do think that it helps people feel a little more positive. So if you have a specific health condition like a dementia, or if you're a caregiver that is just piled on with things, you want to feel a little more positive about the situation that you're facing.
yeah, absolutely. What a beautiful way to put it. Let's come back to the agitation.
So I would say that my husband is a very peaceful person, but he can get agitated sometimes. However, let's talk about dementia, which is like the main thing here today. Although caregivers can also get very agitated, but in with dementias, anxiety is a big part of it. And also certain dementias, they can cause the way the primary care physician explained it to us is that people can be depressed and that's a depression, but Alzheimer's can also give you depression. Um, and anxiety is also tied into all this. So when people are given a diagnosis that they're going to lose their cognition, it doesn't surprise me. I'm not saying that's the reason. Anxiety might be a very common symptom of a dementia, but facing your loss of your cognition and knowing what's going to happen can cause a great deal of anxiety. And so when Henry's siblings were saying that they think the biggest benefit of the microdosing is that he doesn't seem to have anxiety, I was shocked because I didn't really think of it like that, but they're outsiders looking in. I mean, loved ones, but they're not in the day to day of it. And I thought that was very very revealing and extremely empowering, because if microdosing, we know microdosing reduces anxiety. We know high dose journeys of different psychoactive substances, including mushrooms, can reduce anxiety. Doesn't mean they always do. We always have to be careful about that. But the studies and the research is really showing promise in that area. And so with a dementia, which is it so potentially anxiety producing, wow, like here is something that they are seeing that is reducing that anxiety. And as I say, like very low dose every day. It's like taking a vitamin, but it's doing something. And if we can remove that in this journey that's hard enough, wow.
Yeah, and so interesting that that the shift obviously was subtle. So it's there, but it almost took an outside perspective for both you and Henry to understand it, which is so common with microdosing, right? So, and
Yeah.
talking about anxiety, actually, I have a fair percentage of clients that come to me for microdosing guidance who are probably in their 50s, maybe 60s, who are very anxious about the potential of cognitive decline. I forgot where my keys were again. Am I getting dementia? Microdosing help me, and I can relate. But I'm curious, what you have learned or experienced, or anything you can speak to people pre-dementia. Like just with natural cognitive decline, and how we can embrace microdosing as a support for that.
Um, well, this is the first time I'm going to be saying this publicly, but I have big questions about that. And as I'm learning about Alzheimer's, I'm learning about other psychoactive ingredients. And one of the ones for the last 8 months has been really on my screen is ibogaine. And I remember watching Dosed, which is the movie that is so impactful, but it was really around drug addiction. And so a lot of the messaging around ibogaine is to break addiction because it's showing such great promise, and also PTSD. So for veterans, this is why it's getting moving forward with a lot of millions of dollars in research in Texas of all places, because it's about our veterans. And so politically, a conservative party can get behind that. And so most of the social messaging around ibogaine is drug addiction or PTSD or traumatic brain injury. So I kind of dismissed it, but it just kept coming back in my radar. And then when I mentioned that article in the New York Times where it pointed to Alzheimer's, it's like, oh my gosh, like if the senator knows about it, then the research is there. Like this is one of the most conservative senators who has decided to take ibogaine. Um, so I am researching that, and I'm about to turn 70 next month, and I am going to Mexico where it's legal, and I'm doing a very, very, very low level over several days for my brain as a prophylactic. Um, and so we can get more into that, but um, because I'm researching it, I'm like, why would I wait? And it's my 70th birthday, so I'm not going in for the big bang, or I have to change my brain like maybe others might. It's real, we're doing it, and it's a very individualized way of just getting the nor-ibogaine into my system that will be for brain health.
Okay, so we'll be having you back after that. In fact, I am looking for, a guest expert to come to speak to ibogaine, particularly in the context of microdosing. And that's because I've been walking beside a client for the past few months who has been microdosing iboga and having some very, very interesting shifts in all parts of her life. That's made me very, very curious about microdosing of iboga.
So that is, and actually that is when I started learning about it for my husband, I was thinking, so as a microdosing coach, as particularly when I was going through the training, I felt that as with anything, I don't ever teach anything unless I've experienced it myself, even with meditations or anything. I won't say or speak, or like even the thread, like unless I felt that and experienced it, I won't vocalize it. Um, Except when full disclosure, for instance, I have clients in Europe who use truffles because they're legal, and I let them know I have never used truffles. I can't access them here. Please, we'll explore it together if you trust me, otherwise. So that's why I also tried LSD when I was in Canada as a microdose. So I was really curious to also microdose with ibogaine. I actually do have some because the idea is that I'll microdose before I go and then I will microdose afterwards because I want to keep the nor-ibogaine, that particular, you know, um, 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 I don't know what it is, like I want to say chemical, but ingredient in my body, moving through my body into my brain.
Absolutely. And that is actually the client that I'm working with is also, she's working up to a large dose iboga journey. So yeah, it's okay. So we're coming back to this topic.
Okay.
I am sure that there's people here today who want to get in on this community conversation, and I'm starting to monopolize the time, but let's one more, just kind of a free for all from you around microdosing for the caregiver, for the person who's pouring
Yeah, thanks
love and
for us
support
to
in.
just touch on that. So I had last in January, I was at a place in Mexico because we were thinking my husband would go there for a potential eventually assisted living. And anyhow, those things are still open. But what it did is it gave me an opportunity to meet so many caregivers from around the world. And it shocked me how little support they had, how overwhelmed we all are, but how many times they're put on SSRIs. They're like, people, I'm not a depressed person. I've never been depressed before, but I'm so overwhelmed. And it's like, here's your SSRI. Just get through the day, get through this next phase. And it's like, sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't, but they don't want to, like in so many cases, it's like they didn't want to be on antidepressants. But they'd never heard about microdosing. So for those who are comfortable microdosing within their geographical region or political or stigma, whatever, within their cultural setting or personal setting, all I've seen is positive, positive benefits. So I'll just speak for myself. There are days where I won't microdose, and there are days that I will, and I will definitely feel the difference. It's not like I'm depending on it, but like when I feel completely overwhelmed, I can handle it mostly, but when I microdose, it's like I don't tend to get to that overwhelm, or I just feel more positive about everything. I can handle more. I'm more resistant. I'm starting to go to weight training that I've never done in my entire life. But like I'm taking care of myself, and I'm making sure there's this feeling like I can do this. I guess that's it. It's a feeling I can do this. And it's not that I'm going to sink with this boat. And I will say that, especially in those years where you're not sure what is happening and why are they doing that, and I don't try, like I can't even ask them to do that, and why is the, it's a very messy time, and a lot of people end up getting divorced or leaving the other person. I mean, I've spoken to so many people who have so much damage done to their relationship before they realize their loved one has dementia. And even 2 days ago with a dear friend in Canada, I mentioned something like that. And it's like all of a sudden they revise everything they had done. And if it's not the person, it's the disease, there's like a whole replay of everything that they can't go back to. So microdosing helps in those times of just like letting water go off a duck's back, like let it be, just not to get into the nitty gritty or react to every reaction. Like it's all around mindfulness too. If I put it in terms of mindfulness, microdosing helps you become more mindful, more grounded, more at ease, more present without that reactivity. And the most important, and this has been something I've been trying to do for quite a few years since I've noticed my husband having dementia, is just live from a heart of kindness. And that is really hard to do when you're really frustrated or you're dealing with so much or so many more responsibilities are put on you. So I think that microdosing and mindfulness, when we do it in a mindful way, it can help us feel our own present moment of ourselves, that we can be kinder through this very difficult, challenging journey of dementia. And
Amen.
kind to yourself as a caregiver. So, what are your needs? Do you need to go out and have fun with your girlfriends, or do you need to, go to the gym or something? Like, take care of yourself as part of kindness.
Yeah, yeah. Like we always say, like you can't pour from an empty cup. So it's important to fill your own cup. And I can definitely attest to microdosing having supported me through, yeah, the real confusion and frustration, of being the caregiver and exhaustion and overwhelm and yeah, and sleeplessness, all the things.
All the things. Yeah,
All
I
the
mean, and
things.
of course it helps the caregiver sleep better too, because that is definitely people can. I've met so many people that will say they're up all night ruminating because of all the things, and and I mean, there's a dear friend now, a dear friend who's her husband just turned 55 and he's in advanced care. So her journey's just been a year and a half.
Yeah.
And from having a husband since they were 17, they got married at 17. And, and so just can you imagine a life flipped upside down in a very small amount of time? So, yeah.
Oh, yeah, my heart just feels that weight
And
so
she
much.
was, put on SSRIs and she was crying about that too. Because it's like, I don't want to be on antidepressants.
Yeah,
Like, why did the
exactly.
doctor do that? But I didn't know what else to do. So people are at wit's end and they're alone and isolated and not connected. And I think oftentimes we see within a microdosing community or the plant medicine community, there is more connection as well.
Yeah, and on that note of the caregivers, I just want to point everybody to laurenalderfer.com, to Lauren's website, because she has a couple of free resources there. She has the Mindful Microdosing for Caregivers, an overview, and she has a caregiver mindfulness practice. So if this is you, the caregiver, really encourage you to go and check out Lauren's site for that. Um, Okay, community conversation. Let's go. I know a lot of you must have some questions or stories or seeking or providing support for others. Wendy, thank you so much for being with us as always, doing all the tech background stuff, bringing our Clubhouse community over here too. But of course, I just want to turn it over to you first to, anything that's on your mind around the conversation today.
Yeah, I didn't take care of my grandma, but I definitely had a lot of phone calls with her during the time. But a lot of what you were saying right now just really resonates with me because my younger son has a brain injury. So I am a caregiver. Just all, I will be a caregiver until the day I die, most likely. Um, and so a lot of the things that you were talking about, I definitely resonate with and the consent thing that you really helped kind of frame some things with me because it's something that I definitely struggle with because he's a child, he has a brain injury, he really doesn't understand consent even if he's lucid, it's not dementia, but um I just want to say thank you for being here and doing this work and sharing your story because even though it wasn't the same, I got so much benefit from you, coming forward and speaking up. And I just really appreciate you being here.
Well, Wendy, first of all, my heart goes out to you and to your son. And, who knows why, how, the reason, but we're in the situations we're in. And what I can say, just to follow up a little bit on that, is that I just recently finished a training with the Living Dying Project with out of California, and it was really beautiful. And I think that one of the things I took to it is it's deeper than just do you have consent or not. It's like if because it was about people who are dying and you're with them and are some do you have their permission for this or that or like it's really it kind of came back to something that resonates with me is are you doing something that you know from your heart is your intention is out of goodness and you feel you don't know but you feel that it's really going to be of benefit to the other person and to me you know, maybe that's enough. Um, I'm just throwing that out there because, what is consent and what is consent when people are, yeah. what is real consent in life in general, but particularly when we know we're really trying to help the person, and we're sitting and understanding that it is really from the goodness of our heart that we're kind of doing something that we really feel is going to benefit the other person. And um, that's an act of kindness.
I want to add on to that because the other part that I forgot about until you were saying that, how, and Dana, you had said about like the two roads, like the decline and the thing. I may not, I don't have the decline with him. I just have the damage that will probably never be undone. But simultaneously, there are these little improvements. And sometimes those small little things of improvement, it's so hard to explain how they just make such a huge difference. Like it it makes all the difference in the world from one day to the next when you're like, oh my gosh, we're not dealing with this one other thing that we normally have to deal with, as especially as a caregiver, like just some days you're just, you know, you don't want that extra piece of straw to break the camel's back, you know. And if you can take off some of those pieces, you know, straw pieces, right? The load really does get lighter. So just
Well, it reduces life in the day to the small things do matter, and how we do them does matter, and how we connect, how we have our thread from our heart to the others and the others back to us. Those things do matter. How we started this little mindfulness moment of connecting and building through our breath. Our breath is just our our vehicle for taking in energy and giving it and offering it out and then receiving from others, and these other things become they take their own importance and perspective depending on our lives. And for you, these little things are big things. They're
Mhm.
big. They may appear little, but I hope it keeps building that thread to be stronger. Yeah.
Beautiful.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren.
Mm.
All right, our community who's here with us today, we'll open up to see if there's any questions, any shares, any stories that you have yourself of caregiving or people with dementia in your lives. Siri, maybe we'll start with you with your hand up.
Hi. My dog was getting involved there. Hi,
Dana, yes.
Dana, and Lauren. Um, I I don't think I've really shared this, and I feel really kind of a bit weird to share it, but just the threads of this conversation. Was this time last year I went to South Africa to visit my mom who had dementia, and I knew the light was kind of going out, and I wanted to spend some time with her. So I went over, and I have a strong macro and microdose practice. And I live in England, but my favorite sitter is in South Africa. And I was visiting my mom like every day in this care home, and she was just like just begging me to end her life, like just begging me, just she was suffering so much. And like you were saying earlier, Lauren, like she somehow knew she was trapped. And it was just absolutely devastating. And every day I would sit with her and she would just say, please, help me. And I was thinking to myself, like, I've been practicing shamanism for like decades. There's got to be a way, there's got to be a way I can help her out. But obviously that it wasn't my role. But whilst I was there, I went and did a macro trip with my sitter, and I took kind of my mom with me, and was really halfway through. I had such a strong sense that she had passed, that something had left, that part of her had left. And I had a very strong moment in the trip where I didn't know if I was her or my daughter or me. And I kept looking at my hands, and they were my daughter's hands, and then my mother's hands, and then my hands. And this whole like female line was happening really strongly. And a couple of days later, my mom died. And like I couldn't believe it. She actually had a fall and she left her consciousness and she never came back. And I think I've never spoken about that because I feel like maybe I was part of the, you know, the process, but I feel like, yeah, just the something you were saying about the thread, you know, these threads. And I think dosing also like opens you up to such a different liminality and connection. And then my daughter doses because she's epileptic. And it just felt like there's this very strong like link between, and I still like can't believe my mom like died a couple of days later after that experience.
The whole
And I
time you speak. Oh, no, go ahead. Sorry.
no, I just know that it's connected. It wasn't a coincidence or yeah.
Well, the whole time you're speaking, I've like shivers everywhere, and that says a lot. Um, and it's interesting how you tied it up to what I had said. I I do believe, and I've written about this, and I've been told that, and you can hear it in the telepathy tapes too. There's one little episode about someone with Alzheimer's. Um, that people are in a way not necessarily trapped in their body, but their consciousness has already left their body. They're not there. Their spirit, their consciousness, their essence is already pretty much gone. And so it doesn't surprise me that when you're in another state of being that you can connect and then help that energy. Because at the end of the day, consciousness is always at peace. It's when we're in this duality, and let's say for Alzheimer's, and it sounds like your mom, it was in the body that she didn't want it. She was ready. She was ready. And we always hear stories of people who are ready, but they can't quite go. And um, so thank you. That is just such a profoundly beautiful, beautiful story, not story, a lived experience, especially the way you described it to us, because it's very empowering, very empowering. And in a way, you gave your mother the biggest gift that she wanted. And the connection of generations is never lost. The liminality. I love that you use that word. That thread is always there.
So
Yeah,
beautiful.
beautiful.
Thank you, Sari, so much for coming and sharing that story with us. It's beautiful. Thank you.
Really, really beautiful. I hope you share that in a more public way, like write a story about that or something, because I think it's really profound what you just shared,
Mhm.
and beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. It's kind of terrifying to share it, but it was good to get it out.
Giving you big virtual hugs. This is like this is where we
You
say
helped you helped your mom move into the freedom that her soul was seeking.
yeah, yeah. And I would say that is not coincidental. That is by design there.
I always say that the most sacred moments of my life were when I have sat by people who have had a very, very difficult life, and the moment they passed, they were at peace. I really do feel that that is probably one of the biggest blessings anyone can have, and that's what you just described.
Yeah. Thank you, Siri. Anyone else who's with us today? Emma, thank you for joining us today. It's so nice to
Yeah,
see
no,
you.
it's been really rich at many levels. And Syria, I loved your story. I'm also in Europe. I'm in France. And you probably can't even begin to answer the first question just because of your disclaimer at the beginning. I'm really new to microdosing guiding, but my mum, who's 86, has, I would say, early cognitive decline and probably undiagnosed ADHD, a whole range of things. And she's been as strong as an ox up until last December, where she had some heart arrhythmia. And having been super healthy, always into natural foods, sporty, she still swims 500 meters every day. She's now on a bunch of heart medicines. And just a very quick search, and I'm doing Casey Garrett's guiding program at the moment, and I know we're going to get to speak to the spirit pharmacist Ben Malcolm next week. So this question can absolutely wait. And if you feel you can say anything about contraindications on that level, my mum's game. She's game to try this. It's kind of her birthday present,
Oh.
and really interested. And if you can't answer that question, I just really want to commend you on. I really wasn't thinking about the parallel role of microdosing supporting caregivers, and having been a caregiver for my husband actually, and then my daughter, whose lives ended, I just realized now how much microdosing would really have helped. So thank you for bringing in the caregivers. That's really powerful. So
Well, as
two
the
themes of my
disclaimer
questions.
said, but there are a few things, like I know, you have a shop in Europe, Microdosing NL, I think.
Yeah.
So they're a resource, but, and Ben Malcolm, of course, but with any program in microdosing, there's always going to be a thorough intake form. So I think even when I mentor people or people, yeah, I always go through a intake form. I'm sure Casey as well. So you can ask those questions. Yeah, and there was one there was one other thing that you said that um, executive. Okay, it was about ADHD, and I just want to pick up on this. So when we look at microdosing, we're looking at, if we look at executive function, which if we look at ADHD and ADD, we're looking at executive function. So there are different things that people are going to do better than others. So some are preparation, but they don't organize or they don't pre-plan. So when we look at executive function and microdosing, what's happening is we are making more neural connections. So executive functions will increase, all of them. So the ones that, and I've seen this too with dementia, with just observation. I'm not a research scientist or anything, but the executive functions that they're weaker in usually get weaker. So microdosing does help with all that part of executive function. I've seen that over and over again, but it makes sense. It makes total sense because
Yeah.
we're building that neural connectivity.
Thank you.
Focus of attention always comes out as one of the biggest benefits. Well, that's an executive function. Focus.
Yeah.
Keeping attention. Yeah.
A year ago, before any heart trouble, I would have just been, this sounds like a really good option. I'm a bit nervous about the
Yeah,
heart
it's
side.
always better to be safe, and heart function is actually one of the things that you really do need to be aware of any contraindications or any extra burden on your heart. I know that you will learn this in Casey's program, and you'll learn how to do a thorough intake as well. And then probably for my fellow microdosing coaches and mentors as well, I certainly have a pharmacist that I have a very close relationship with, so that when a medication comes into my field with a potential client that I'm not aware of, I actually have a direct source to go to be really, really sure and really clear with that. So Ben is a great source. The pharmacist that I often work with is Trina Nguyen. She's here in Canada. She is she goes by another name too, doesn't she? The Dharmacist. The Dharmacist.
Oh, I love
And she runs Code School, training people how to serve 5-MeO DMT. But yeah, always consult with your healthcare professionals and with your pharmacist. Yeah, thanks, Emma, and
you.
best wishes for the journey ahead. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Anything else from our live community here that's with us today? If you do have something to share on this episode and you are listening to the replay on the Psychedelic Revelations podcast, or if there's anything that comes up on the podcast today for the live audience that we don't get to today, be sure you head over to psychedelic-revelations.com. That's our brand new spanking website. It's the home for our podcast. And there's a little widget in the top right to join our community. That will take you into our community where we can continue conversations on each of the topics of all of our podcast episodes. So feel free to come and join us over there. And maybe, Lauren, we can get some of your resources in there in that community conversation as well.
Great.
Lauren, is there anything else that's coming up for you in your journey that you found surprising that you might like to share to people who might be going on this journey with their loved ones?
Actually, we haven't spoken about it, and I don't know if this is the place to speak about it, but Henry and I speak about it a lot because he's married to me, so he has to have these conversations while we can have them. And that is to talk about death. I think it's really important. I think it's people want to avoid that, particularly in Western cultures, less so in Eastern traditions. But I think it's important because, at least in my practices, when you practice around death and dying, it helps you really be present and feel the preciousness of this moment and live with more awareness. Having said that, I think that in a nuts and bolts way, understanding what are the person's wishes, what are the person's desires, and also for the caregiver, like, will they be able to honor that or not? These conversations do not take place on a Friday and are finished on a Saturday. And I've met so many caregivers that are so, they are so sorry that they did not have these conversations when they still could. And I know that I'm getting really close to the point where I'm not going to be able to have these conversations, and I have to catch when I can have a conversation where I know that Henry is really present and can keep the conversation. So we keep coming to what I want to call advanced directives around death and dying, because he is signed up in Switzerland with Dignitas, because he knows that he does not want to go through those last stages, but it's a very slippery slope as to when is the right time. And so I had one very clear advance directive that he doesn't want, he's losing his ability to walk, which is very heartbreaking. But so one of the advance directives, just to be very specific, is that he doesn't want to be in a wheelchair and not have his cognition. He's okay being in a wheelchair, but if he doesn't have his cognition, then he'll be bathed and all that. He's like, so that was the first advance directive. And I write about all this in the blog as it kind of unfolds. So that was several months ago. But then a few weeks ago, then the question keeps coming up, is like, when is the right time? When is the right time? And so the next big question was, if you go to Switzerland, do you want to have enough cognition to have your, me and your loved ones around you and be aware that that's happening or not? Those are two big choices, right? Like, and then the other one is, if not, can I honor that? So his big decision was that, yes, he wants to have his cognition. So that's where we're at right now. And that implies a lot of different things. And now I understand that we need to figure out, like, what are going to be some, like, actual criteria for that, because I do believe that we're now in that moderate slippery slope time where, if you read Still Alice or saw the movie, she had everything planned with all her notes and the pills in the box and, in the drawer, and then she couldn't find them. And so by default, that was that, she declined to a place that she did not want to be. Obviously now in the United States, there is no, in Vermont, we have medical aid and dying, but in the US, there's no one with dementia can access medical aid and dying, because, for instance, in Vermont, you have to be cognitive and you have to self-ingest. So that takes away. And Quebec is the first and only province, I believe, that is this is allowed with advanced directives. It's not federally allowed, but the federal government has said to the province of Quebec, we won't bother you. But I hope these laws are changing. We're considering talking to a lawyer to try to change a law in Vermont, but it might not be worth it. I don't know. You have to pick so many things but he wants to be an advocate for change and for feeling comfortable about talking about death and how people with dementia should have a choice of how they want to and how long they want to be physically present on this earth.
Thank you so much for bringing that up, Lauren. Such an important such important conversations to have. I know in my own situation, I was really lucky. My parents had these conversations with us from time we were really young around the around the dinner table. So we all know exactly where we all lie on this kind of spectrum around death and wishes around that. And my mom actually opted for medically assisted dying and had one of the most beautiful, peaceful passages into the next realm that I've ever experienced. I couldn't wish for anything more beautiful or peaceful for her. And then my dad didn't have that option, and it was so frustrating because my brother and I, we know he doesn't want to be here. He's told us he doesn't want to be here. These were the things that were included in his quality of life, and yet because of these rules around dementia with medically assisted dying, we were helpless.
It makes no sense. And like Artie's mom, she was able to communicate, and whatever happened happened, because there are so many people that they're by default because of laws, but it's not like our heart laws, of what people really want. Yeah.
I'm just looking, Lauren, into the questions here, and I did see had Ashish looking for the website for the Ibogaine retreat in Mexico, if you were willing
Oh,
to share that.
it's actually not a retreat center, but there are quite a few. And if someone wants to reach out to me later, will they be able to do that?
Yeah, just head on over to laurenalderfer.com to contact Lauren, or head into psychedelic-revelations.com and join our community. And I would really appreciate having we would really appreciate having these conversations be in the public forum in the community so that others can benefit from this as well. So I'd really love that if you could follow up on psychedelic-revelations.com. Ashish also has questions about the Death Doula course, so maybe she can reach out to Lauren on that topic separately.
Yeah, there's so
And
many. Went through the University of Vermont, and to answer, I think Emma put something in the chat. So, my husband had to put in all his medical information into Dignitas, and he has an advanced directive, so he is eligible because he was able to do an advanced directive when when he had mild cognitive impairment. Yeah. So, again, I don't know if people can go like, yeah, so I don't know Dignitas and other organizations where it's legal to access death with dignity have their own eligibility. So that has to be looked into. But again, it's like if people are too scared to talk about it, then they lose the opportunity to make choices.
absolutely. Yeah, don't wait. It's the biggest advice we have at this point in time. Does anybody else have anything they might like to share or ask before we wrap up for today? Oh, Lauren, I'm just so full of gratitude. I had no idea that this was going to be as an emotional episode for me as it was. But I mean, these are people that we love. These are people that we care for. These are people that could be us one day. And so I just really can't, I don't have the words of gratitude enough to thank you and Henry for being willing to share your personal journeys, for being willing to take risks, to be willing to pioneer and experiment on behalf of, the greater good of that silver thread that runs between us all. And yeah, I just encourage everybody to follow Lauren. I really love following you on LinkedIn. Your posts on LinkedIn that lead into your blog articles always really capture my attention. So I encourage people to follow Lauren there. Lauren, how else could people get in touch with you, and what other things can you offer of support?
Well, on Instagram with Lauren Alderfer, and also on my website, as you mentioned, I have quite a few resources. I also have a self-paced class on mindful microdosing. So it's got teachings and meditations along with it. And you can find out about my mentorships off the website. But I also, I was writing an article a month, got published up until recently, where again, I can't do it all. But I also have this started with the Spotify that I have. The Spotify is called Microdosing and More. So learning a lot about microdosing, but as you learn about microdosing, it kind of leads into understanding that there are other ways of doing things as well that people tend to get interested in. So just trying to destigmatize, like you, Dana, try to destigmatize and try to educate on the really mindful, respectful use of plant medicines and other psychoactive ingredients and synthetics. But more than anything, build community and share from a place of authenticity of what's happening in my life right now. So yeah, mostly my website and Instagram, and you can always reach out to me through Dana or Wendy if you'd like to. Or actually, on my intake form, you'll be able to reach out to me via my website.
Thanks, Lauren. And yeah, just building on the last point of build community. And that's what the Flourish Academy is here for, is for safe, supportive places to have these kind of conversations and to continue them on in between our Friday shows. So once again, this is just a heartfelt invitation to come and join us at psychedelic-revelations.com. You'll see our upcoming episodes. Next week, we have Michaela Delamico coming to join us. She is head researcher for Mothers of the Mushroom Project. I'm not exactly sure what we're going to be talking about yet, but our conversations with her are always amazing. And there's links there too. We have over 100, well, this is episode 111. So links to all our past episodes. There's pretty much everything under the sun around psychedelics and microdosing. Wendy, over to you.
I was going to say it's 112.
Oh, episode 112. Yeah, rocking on. Hope to see you. I really hope to see you in community. Thanks everybody so much who was here joining us live today. Thank you for being part of our community, our family. And Wendy, would you like to take us out of the room of the show for today?
Sure. So I invite everybody who is listening in the audience over in Clubhouse or watching this on YouTube or is here with us in the Zoom to take a moment and and you can unmic right now if you're here in the Zoom. Let's all unmic and take a big deep breath in together. And now let's start or growl it out.
And with the support, the love of the Flourish family behind you, may you all go forth and flourish. Ending the show.